Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing a very tiny September wrap-up. Alright guys, so this is going to be the shortest wrap-up I have ever done on my channel since starting my channel over 5 years ago. September was rough. Like I said in my most recent video, life has been lifing, so I had almost no time to read. So I ended up reading 6 books in September. Honestly, I'm impressed with myself that I managed to get those books read because most of the books I did read were very thick. So I did read a lot of longer books in September, but also kind of what I've hinted at in other videos, I was super busy. So one of the projects I've been working on actually ended up launching at the end of September. The other project is going to launch at the very beginning of October. So I just had absolutely no extra time to read. I was working like 14 to 17 hours every day. Now that is starting to slow down, so I've already almost finished 2 books for October, so I'm hoping my October wrap-up will have a decent amount more books. I also talked about this in my October TBR video that I just filmed. I will be going back to 2 videos a week starting mid to the end of October. I know my upload schedule has been super sporadic, and I really do apologize. I love making content and getting content to you guys. It's just been really hard, but I see an end in sight. So anyway, I am very excited to talk about the few books that I did read in September. Now, they are mostly fantasy romance, although there is one just straight up kind of like D&D fantasy on this list that I'm very excited to talk about. And if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about the few books I read in September. Alright guys, so starting off, we have Empire of Flame and Thorns. This is the start of a dark kind of fantasy romance series that involves both fae and dragon shifters. Now this was my September Patreon book club book, and I am so happy my patrons picked this book because I had a fabulous time with this. That being said, I don't know if everybody is going to rate this book 4 stars like I did. I did end up giving this, I believe, 4 or 4.5. The writing leaves a little bit to be desired. It is definitely predictable, and there are plot holes galore. But I was vibing with this book. The action really never lets up. It hooks you immediately, and I did love the characters. The ending also was completely unexpected. Like, I had an idea where this book was headed, but I did not call the ending. And I am desperate to read book 2. So if anyone has any knowledge on when the audiobooks for the rest of the series are going to drop, please leave it down in the comments below or DM me on Instagram. I cannot find these audiobooks anywhere, and I really want to continue. Now, with all of that out of the way, if you are unfamiliar with the plot of this, we are following Selena, and she is a fae living in a world where the dragon shifters control the fae. And that is because the fae attempted to kind of take over the dragon shifters at one point thousands of years ago, and now the dragon shifters have made the fae kind of like subservient after slaughtering most of them. So anyway, main character Selena is a fae, and she is part of a rebel group trying to kind of take down the dragons. Now, Selena has a very unique ability where she can manipulate emotions. And because of this, everyone pretty much hates her. Like, absolutely everybody, because they see her ability as being unbelievably dangerous, which is so unfair. Even her parents really just do not get along with her because they believe every time they fight, it is because of her kind of messing with them. So she's very lonely and is very much a people pleaser, so I so related to this character. I did kind of love her for that. So she decides she is going to become part of the Atonement Trials. The Atonement Trials are these deadly trials that take place every few years or every 100 years, and it is held by the head dragon shifters. The top 3 fae that survive these trials are granted every wish that they could possibly desire. So this is a very coveted kind of role. So anyway, our main character ends up entering these trials, and she's trying to survive and it becomes so much more difficult when Draven, one of the head dragon shifters, decides he also hates her, and he is going to do everything in his power to stop her from winning these trials. And it's really how our main character has to look within herself and finally decide that she has a badass ability and she is going to use it by any means necessary. And I did love her character growth throughout this book. Now, once again, the ending of this book, while parts of it I kind of knew what was going to happen, I did not guess the very, very end, and I need to know what is going to happen next. So if you have read this series, let me know, what did you think? And also, if anyone has info on the audiobook, please let me know. And next up, I finally read City of Gods and Monsters, which is the first book in the House of Devils series by Kayla Edwards. Now, I read this as part of a read-along that is taking place over on my Patreon, open to all tiers, and we are reading book 2 in October. Now, I have very mixed feelings regarding this book. It is a dark urban fantasy, and admittedly, I am not the biggest urban fantasy fan, and I feel like that might play a bit of a role in why I didn't love this. But if you are unfamiliar with this book or this series in general, it is set in a world where there are humans and then there are like monsters and other paranormal beings. Our main character is a human named Loren, and she is powerless. And one day she is out with 2 of her friends, and there's essentially a rule in this world that do not go out at night because you will probably be killed and or kidnapped by these monsters that only come out at night. Well, although this seems like a very important rule to follow, Loren spends almost all of this book not following that rule. But anyway, her and her friends end up finding themselves having to walk home, and while they are doing so, it becomes dark out, and her friend ends up being kidnapped by these supernatural, almost bounty hunters, but it seems like they were actually trying to capture Loren and just took her friend in the hopes of eventually getting her. Now, Loren is very distraught that her friend has just been captured, so she goes to the police, who don't really do anything. So now she is feeling hopeless, and she turns to Darien Castle, who is one of the members of these 7 devils, which is kind of like a vigilante gang, and they all also have super abilities, and it's their romance. Also, we're trying to solve the mystery of where or what happened to Loren's friend, also who is secretly trying to capture Loren, and there is a lot going on in this book. Once again, it is unbelievably long, and that is one of the biggest issues I had with this. So, I feel like this book probably could have been about 200 pages less, and I still would have been able to get all of the information. There was just a lot without a ton of world building, and I wish we had a little bit more. I was confused at the end of this. I feel like we were given so much thrown at us at the end, and I wish it was a little bit more, I don't know, spread out. The pacing was a little bit better. Also, this is a slight, very, very minor, or kind of not minor, trigger warning, and kind of spoiler, so I'll leave a spoiler warning on the screen. There is death of an animal in this, but not really, because they kind of take that away, and that is my biggest issue I have with this book, and my friend kind of brought this up during the live show. I am one of those people where I hate death of an animal. I typically won't read a book that has death of an animal, but once I do, I kind of want that emotional impact to stay. So in this book, the animal ends up dying, but then the animal ends up coming back. I kind of wished we just left it. Either kill off the animal or don't. I don't love killing off people or animals and then bringing them back within a few chapters. It seems kind of cheap to me, but that is just me personally. So I didn't love that aspect of the book. Also, I had some issues with the audiobook. The way certain words are pronounced, I just found kind of comical. I don't know if that is how the author intended them to be pronounced, like money instead of money. I feel like that could have been like said a little bit differently. So I'm very nitpicky here, but overall, I just wanted to love this a little bit more. So, spoilers over. Now, I will try the second book. Obviously, I am hosting a read-along, but I don't know if we're going to go past that, depending on what I end up rating the second book and what my patrons decide. So far, everyone kind of gave it a mixed rating. So I'm very curious. If you've read this, does this series get better as you go? I just said this in another video. I don't mind reading a couple thicker books and then absolutely loving the series. I did that with Throne of Glass. I didn't love the first 2, but then loved the rest. So I'm fine with doing that if it does get better. But if I am not enjoying this from book 1, do you think I should continue? Let me know in the comments. Alright, so this next book is not my typical genre. However, my husband actually put this book on while we were driving to book Scouts and Crowns, and I had some patrons and some friends tell me that I should look into this book. So I read Dungeon Crawler Carl, and I will say this book was unlike any book I've ever read before. So I ended up giving it either 4 or 4.5 stars. I'm still not exactly sure. It might be 4.5 just because of Princess Donut. But essentially what happens in this book is we are following this guy who is just recently broken up with his girlfriend. He's kind of sulking in his apartment with his cat, or his ex-girlfriend's cat. And the cat ends up jumping out of a window, and he begrudgingly goes outside to go find it. Well, when he does, all of the apartments collapse around him, killing everybody instantly, and he realizes he is now part of an alien game show where he is going to have to survive different levels, if he chooses, in order to hopefully gain control of his planet. And it goes from there. I will say this was definitely more like violent/gory than I was anticipating when starting. Now, obviously, like looking back, I don't know why I didn't think it was going to be violent, because it is essentially a dungeon crawler game, but in book form. But the humor in this is so good. So that's all I kept hearing before I picked this book up was, oh my gosh, it's so funny, it's so funny. And typically I don't love like super humorous books. I was cracking up the entire time. So it did take me a little while to get into. Around chapter 6 or 7 is really when the plot started to pick up. But overall, I did really enjoy this. So I don't think this is a series I'm going to end up binging, but when I'm in like a bit of a reading slump or driving in the car with my husband, I do think it's another book that we will continue. So next up, I read Gold, and I am currently about 60% into Goldfinch by Raven Kennedy, which are the last 2 books in the Plated Prisoner series, starting with Guild. Now, this is the conclusion to a read-along that has been taking place on my Patreon for the last few months. And unfortunately, while I did absolutely love the first few books in the Plated Prisoner series, these last 2 books have been my least favorite. Mostly Gold. I do think I'm going to end up rating Goldfinch possibly a 4, 3.754, depending on what ends up, like, the final ending ends up being. But the last book I read, Gold, it felt very much like filler. I feel like once a certain character passed away in this series has really gone downhill in my eyes. It just feels like we've added an entire plot that wasn't there from the very beginning. Very hard to kind of explain without spoilers, but if you want to leave comments, like, I'll go and discuss it in the comments. But I just feel like once we've kind of added that, which we ended up adding at the end of book 3, I believe, I really kind of lost interest. So Gold in particular, there were a lot of like side quests, I would like to say, with a character, and I could have cared less following those. Also, the main character in Gold was doing some very, very frustrating things. So overall, Gold was by far my least favorite in this series. Goldfinch, we're still kind of doing the same things we were doing in the previous book. I also feel like both books probably could have just been one. I'm not sure they needed to be separated, because it does feel like there's a lot of filler. If you're unfamiliar with the Plated Prisoner series, I just realized I never really gave you guys a synopsis for book 1. We are following RN. It is a very loose King Midas reimagining. RN has been gold-touched by Midas, and he keeps her in his gilded cage, where she is essentially just used to be shown off to show off Midas's power, and all RN really cares about is pleasing Midas, being safe, and just being subservient to Midas. Well, everything changes when RN is forced to leave her gilded cage, gets to kind of open her eyes to the world, and it's really just watching RN grow into this complete badass person. But I feel like we kind of reached that in book 3 or 4, and now it's becoming a bit repetitive. So overall, I still very much recommend this series. I just don't love the final books as much as I was really hoping to. Last up, I reread Storm of Secrets and Sorrows, the second book in the Legacy series by Melissa K. Roehrich, as part of our Legacy series read-along taking place on my Patreon. Now, the first time I read this, I actually preferred book 1 to book 2, this book. This time around, they were pretty even. I definitely enjoyed this book more on my reread, knowing what happens in book 3. I feel like this book does also have a ton of miscommunication, but you can forgive it a little bit easier having read book 3, and now I have started book 4. I was really trying not to, but like, I need to know what happens. Anyway, if you're unfamiliar with the Legacy series, my favorite fantasy romance series of all time that I've talked about in essentially every video since I've read it, we are following Tessa. Tessa is a fae living in a world where the gods have granted power to their children, the Legacy, and the Legacy control the fae. So when Tessa comes to her ceremony where she is going to be placed in one of the different Legacy households, she is chosen to become the primal source to the heir of endings. Now, Tessa was not expecting to be given this role. She is going to have this mark placed upon her that will allow the heir to draw power from her. And on top of that, these marks are going to allow him to sense when she's near, feel her emotions, and also she is going to become physically attracted to him. So it is kind of like a forced mating bond, and I'm obsessed. This series has everything. Every sort of paranormal creature you can possibly imagine, tons of action, mental health rep. The characters are so fleshed out, and you will definitely have your favorites. I could talk all day about this series. I love it so, so much. So if you have not read this yet, please do yourself a favor and pick it up. All right, guys, that is it for my very, very tiny September wrap-up. Once again, I am hoping to have a lot more time to read in October, so hopefully my October wrap-up is significantly longer. But let me know down in the comments below, what was your top book that you read in September? And I'd like to say a special thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Leslie, Christy, Kat, Lotta, and Nerdy. Thank you, thank you, thank you for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.